Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that might seem a bit dense on the surface, but is actually completely fascinating once you unpack the mechanics. We're talking about New Hampshire's rapidly shifting educational pathways. Whether you're a parent, a teacher, or honestly just someone curious about how states are reinventing education these days, there is a ton to unpack here. We're going to break down exactly how these programs function, and we're going to completely strip away the political noise to just focus purely on the facts.
It all really starts with this one fundamental question, right? How do you match a kid to the exact right learning environment? Because for a lot of families, the traditional assigned district school is a perfect fit. It works beautifully. But for others, a child might need a totally different academic pace, highly specific special education services, or really just a different daily vibe. So when we look at New Hampshire's current state programs, the absolute best way to understand them isn't as some grand political debate, it's a practical toolkit for families. These are mechanisms literally designed to give parents the flexibility to match the schooling directly to the student.
Okay, let's dive into our roadmap for today. First, we'll cover the school choice landscape. Second, education freedom accounts explained. Third, the tax credit scholarship program. Fourth, finding the right fit. And finally, shifting policies in 2026.
Starting off with Section 1, the school choice landscape.
Now, New Hampshire gets highlighted nationally quite a bit, and that's because it actively combines multiple pathways into one unified state system. Families aren't just stuck with one single alternative. You've got 5 main avenues here: district public schools, chartered public schools, home education, private schools, and state-supported programs. This kind of structural variety gives parents an incredible amount of room to maneuver if their kids' current setup just isn't working out. It's a broad, highly flexible system, built with multiple different off-ramps for success.
Moving right along to Section 2, education freedom accounts explained.
So the crucial point here is understanding exactly what an EFA actually is under state law, because it's New Hampshire's most famous school choice program, but it's constantly misunderstood. An education freedom account is a state-funded account, period. It takes the per-pupil adequate education grant amount, along with any differentiated aid that would have normally gone to that student's local public school, and redirects those funds into a dedicated account for the family. It is a direct reallocation of state education funds meant to be managed for that specific, eligible student.
But what can you actually do with that money? Well, the versatility is honestly surprising. The state allows these funds to be applied to a bunch of things: tutoring, curriculum, online learning, or even specialized educational therapies. So it's not just about private school tuition. However, it's super important to note that these accounts are not some kind of free-for-all. They are strictly administrated through approved scholarship organizations that operate under direct state oversight, just to ensure every dollar is used appropriately.
Now we have to talk about limits, and this number is absolutely critical: 10,000. That is the hard enrollment cap for EFAs in New Hampshire for the 2025 to 2026 school year. Why does that matter to you? Well, state law dictates that current EFA students get priority for renewal before any new students are let in. This means families can't just assume that checking all the eligibility boxes guarantees them a spot. That 10,000 student cap is a very real, very practical boundary on the program right now.
Alongside that enrollment cap, there are some pretty strict academic and compliance requirements. EFAs are heavily intended to support education across core knowledge domains. We're talking everything from math and science to history, government, reading, art, and music. For parents, especially if you're thinking about blending homeschooling with private tutoring and outside services using EFA funds, you have to review these rules so carefully. The state mandates that the education you provide covers these specific bases. So, careful planning and strict compliance, absolutely mandatory.
Let's jump into Section 3, the tax credit scholarship program.
Established way back in 2012, this program operates on a completely different funding mechanism than the EFRAs. Instead of using direct state funding, this setup allows businesses and individuals with qualifying interest and dividend tax liability to donate their own money to approved scholarship organizations. And in exchange for that donation, they get a state tax credit. Then, those scholarship organizations take those private donations and award them as scholarships to help kids attend private schools.
To put a solid metric on how this looks for the donor, the New Hampshire Department of Revenue Administration sets the tax credit at 85% of a qualifying donation. This whole program runs on a cycle from July 1st through June 30th. It's basically a really clever incentive structure designed specifically to drum up private funding for scholarships, which then filters right down to the families who need financial help with private school tuition.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core difference between these two massive programs. On one side, you have education freedom accounts, direct state-funded accounts using public per-pupil grants for a huge variety of expenses. On the other side, the tax credit program relies entirely on tax credit-supported private donations specifically earmarked for private school scholarships. So the tax credit program is a fantastic way to slash private school costs for sure, but it is not a universal voucher, and it is most definitely not an EFA. Your chances of getting a tax credit scholarship depend entirely on how much private cash those scholarship organizations actually manage to raise that year.
Section 4. Finding the right fit.
If you are a parent trying to navigate all this, you really need a practical, step-by-step game plan. Step 1. Verify your EFA eligibility under the current law, and critically, check if there is actually any space left under that 10,000 student cap. Step 2. Crunch the numbers. Confirm exactly which of your planned expenses are officially approved, and if you're looking at private schools, calculate down to the dollar what costs will be left over after your scholarship or EFA aid kicks in. Step 3. Assess your child's specific needs, especially regarding special education, and figure out exactly how those services will be delivered if you leave the public district.
You know, it is so easy to get caught up in the flashy headlines about school choice and big funding amounts, but at the end of the day, daily logistics dictate your success. You have to factor in transportation. Does the new school even offer a bus, or are you driving every day? Can your work schedule actually handle the drop-off times? Because a scholarship might cover tuition, but it doesn't magically solve a 45-minute commute each way, especially not during a New Hampshire blizzard.
This actually brings us to a really crucial perspective from the research. A program can be available on paper but still be a poor match if the school, services, or logistics do not work for the student. Basically, school choice is about fit, not just access. These state programs are incredibly powerful tools, but like any tool in a toolkit, they only work if they're matched carefully to the specific job at hand. And in this case, that job is your kid's unique learning style and your family's daily reality.
And finally, Section 5. Shifting policies in 2026.
The state legislature is highly active right now in 2026. They are continuously debating bills that impact literally every single facet we've talked about today. There is active legislation concerning the structure of education freedom accounts, the oversight of those scholarship organizations, the strictness of reporting requirements for families, and just the overall administration of these programs. What this means for you is that school choice in New Hampshire is a live, breathing topic. It is not some fully settled, set-in-stone system.
Because of all this nonstop legislative action, it is absolutely vital that you distinguish between the long-term direction of state policy and the exact specific rules enforced today. The broad stroke is clear. New Hampshire embraces flexibility and multiple pathways. But the granular details, things like income limits for eligibility, administrative red tape, reporting deadlines, and those enrollment caps, they can and do shift from session to session. Think of it like navigating a trail system. You know the general direction you're heading, but you always have to watch your feet for shifting paths before you take your next step.
So, as the 2026 policy shifts continue to rewrite the rulebook, the ultimate question really isn't just about what programs are out there, it's about how quickly can you adapt your child's educational toolkit to keep up. Stay engaged, stay informed, and thank you so much for exploring this explainer with me today.